Hello and welcome to Mates in Space, the show about how we're going to get to space without taking all of Earth's bullshit up with us. I'm Justin.
I am Jack.
And I'm a bit nervous to be delivering the curses in the opening spiel this time because we have some very special guests here with us today. Dr. Susan Close is the Deputy Premier of South Australia, the Minister for Climate, Environment and Water, Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science, and most importantly for our purposes, the Minister for Defence and Space Industries. Dr. Close, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. I'm shocked.
And did I hear there's going to be some profanity in the opening?
Yeah. I've already cursed, so...
If there isn't, I'm storming off. Honestly.
Yeah.
Decorum out the window.
We're trying to get a bit more in there.
Deadwood is my favourite TV show. You can't shock me. Catherine, tell them about yourself. You're amazing. Tell them why.
Thank you very much, Deputy Premier. Pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Catherine Grace. I'm the current Associate Director of Space for the South Australian Space Industry Centre. My doctor is, instead of a PhD, a medical degree. So I've worked in blood and blood cancer, and the tangential reach to space is research, impact, and how we can bring things from this world out of the world.
That's extremely exciting, and I love this.
That's why she's sitting here.
I was going to say, that's almost the perfect podcast to walk into like this.
Well, then I'll direct the first question at both of you then. Why space? Why is space... I'll ask the question in more than 2 words. Why is space important right now? I mean, I've just listed off a huge number of portfolios, a huge number of things that are on your plate.
Very busy woman.
How does space get to rank among those things?
Well, just to describe my portfolio, because there's so many words, it does sound a bit much, doesn't it? But really, there's 2 halves to it. I have an environment and sustainability climate change half and an industry and how we're going to have a future economy half. And actually, they're the same thing, because what we now know is it's not jobs or the economy, it's only... not jobs or the environment. There's only jobs if we look after the environment.
Right.
So trying to have a sense of a future economy that is all about sustainability and zero carbon, but also about complexity, also about using what's in our brains to make things in a way that haven't been made before, that deals with challenges and problems that we haven't dealt with before. Climate change being an overwhelming one, but there are many issues that need to be addressed in our society, including how we have careers for young people, not just job to job to job, that we have a sense of a future and being optimistic. And space has a huge amount to offer there. So it is highly technological. It requires a great deal of education. It will solve or help to solve many of our problems, not least because of its capacity to see things. So if you're wondering what we're going to do about a drying South Australia, how do we know what's happening with the crops or with the national parks? One way is through the deployment of satellites and the sensing technology that's capable of being held, so that we understand what's happening below the surface as well as above the surface. That's just one example. So space is really exciting, but it's also important because people love it, kids love it. It is an aspirational area of the economy to think about. It's an aspirational area for people to want to study in and to work in. And we want to capture people's enthusiasm as well. We've got a lot of natural advantages here to do that. But I'm going to let Catherine answer this question too.
I was going to say.
Why space is probably something she knows even more than I do.
Wonderful.
How do you add on to something so brilliantly put? The only other part that I would say is space really is a horizontal. It goes across all ecosystems. So you've got the humanities, arts, and social sciences, businesses developing space entertainment, everything from space tourism. So you need project management, business, economy. You're going to inspire the youth to really participate. But at the same time, why space? Space is going to be the future of both protecting our planet currently and going off Earth. And we have the know-how, the ability, and a world-leading position to do that in South Australia. Amazing.
Isn't that great? It's so much better than just, you know what, space is so cool and the Victorians aren't doing it. They're going to do it first, right? There's like real reasons as well, which I think is amazing.
I mean, space is very cool is the reason we have this podcast.
Well, yes.
So that's the primary reason for us. Anything else is a bonus. But that all sounds amazing. And I guess to go a little bit more specific, why does space exploration matter? Because we're also... interested, I guess, in exploring space, not just looking back on the Earth, but in travelling to the moon and further to Mars. What's the importance there?
Well, that's probably bigger than just South Australia question, really, isn't it? It's partly a question of what it is to be human and what it is to want to understand ourselves and where we live, the galaxy, the solar system, the galaxy that we live in. But so for South Australia, what we're really interested in is that kind of hardcore technology and science and problem solving, and that can be done in the relatively low orbit space of looking back on Earth, as I described, and also about being a place where venturing further becomes possible. If we sort of stretch out and think of me as Susan rather than me as Deputy Premier, I just find the question of where we fit so fascinating, and I think I share that with so many people. I love reading about space. I've just finished reading a couple more of the Andy Weir novels. He did The Martian, and then I suddenly discovered belatedly he'd written 2 other novels, so I've just finished reading both of those. And it is that kind of inquiring about, what is there any other life anywhere? Is there any other way of living? Is there a future that is more peaceful than the one that we've had in the last few hundred years? And all of those questions are conjured up by contemplating space. Catherine, have you got a theory about life on other planets?
Do you believe in aliens? Is that the question?
I mean, if you're calling me out on being an illegal alien,
No,
I
never.
definitely assure you. Honestly, in terms of exploration and off-Earth resources, what's incredibly important to mention is not only the blue sky research that's taking place, but actually stuff that we think is 50, 100, it's actually 10 years away.
Yes.
The Australian Space Agency is obviously participating in the Moon to Mars initiative, working together closely with NASA and the Artemis mission. And just down the road at the University of Adelaide is the X-Terrace Lab and the Andy Thomas Centre for Off-Earth Resources. Now, what they're doing absolutely blows my mind. So not only is the lab the largest in the Southern Hemisphere, possibly world's largest, but
if not, we can sabotage some stuff.
Yeah,
right?
that's fine.
You know, what's a kilometer here or there, miles? We're talking about space. But they actually do have a lab which has regolith, so that's an off-world simulant, where they're looking at lunar construction. So that's taking moon dust, using it to build bricks and habitats. That's happening. It's happening now, and it's happening here at home. So yes, it's for the future of humanity, but not, 150 years, but tomorrow. So you can study today and work on that now.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That'll help. I can afford a house on the moon, I reckon.
Getting
up there, whole different thing.
We lower housing prices by building affordable housing on the moon.
On the moon. I think that's policy now, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I guess you've sort of already addressed this a little bit, but why is it important that Australia has a space program? I guess partially you've talked about the way that it allows us to bring all those different missions and all those different prospects together, but could you speak a bit more to that? And I'll ask Dr. Close, and then I'll ask Susan, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. So why does it matter? And why are we doing it? Why is Australia doing it? Well, we're really well positioned in the Southern Hemisphere, very, very large land mass, very stable democracy, lots of great research institutions, incredibly well-educated young people. So we're in a really good place physically as well as societally to have to have an industry like this that's going to last a really long time. Obviously, we played an incredibly important role in the parks when we first went to the moon, which was very exciting. But that really was just the very beginning, and we're now accelerating and being able to be involved in having launches as well as constructing the materials, the satellites and so on that go onto the launches, and of course starting to explore the idea of, can we build on the moon, can we reach Mars, and what role do we have to play? The counterfactual would be that somehow Australia, this huge southern educated country, sits out space as a technology, as an industry, and that's kind of unthinkable.
Yeah,
it is a big part of what humans are doing. It's a big part of the economic piece for the future. So of course we're there because we're Australia. That's what we do. We want to get into the latest, greatest and contribute what we have.
When just a few years ago, this all felt so hypothetical, They were like, South Australia will be the centre of the space industry. And in that time, 3 or 4 years, just the investment and the development and all this new stuff, like 4 years ago, I wouldn't have said, yeah, there's a moon brick building lab just down the street, you know?
Yes.
But there is. It's amazing
Yeah.
how quickly this has all come together.
So I went to that big conference here in Adelaide, which was, I guess, 5 years ago.
Yes.
We were in our last year of government previously,
Yeah.
and it was a big deal to get this International Space Conference. But you're right, it felt like, oh, is this something really that is a big thing for us? Do we have a role to play, or are we just a host for this convention?
Just throw a big party.
But
Yeah.
not at all. We were present and ready. And of course, we have the anti-Thomas connection, which has meant that we've always felt this little bit of ownership, I think, of being involved in NASA and space. But from that conference, which was so successful, we then saw the Australian Space Agency being located in South Australia. We saw bipartisan, so it didn't matter that the Liberals are in government. It doesn't matter now that Labor's back. We have a shared view. It's a consistent view that we're here. We've got a big contribution to make, and we're going to get a lot out of it as well, particularly for our young people, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was one of the things I was going to ask you is how does that, because it sounds like it's something that has existed between governments and it's been something that, you know, was supported by the Weatherall government through Marshall. Obviously, the announcement for the Space Agency was under the federal Morrison and state Marshall governments. How do your goals differ? Do your goals differ from the previous government? How has that period of transition been?
Yeah, so I don't think there is, and you know, the agency might have a different view, but you might not feel like you can say anything either, because it's all very delicate with public servants. I don't think you'd get a distinction between us. I think this is one of the beauties of a centralist democracy, where in South Australia, although we have differences in emphases and we have some particular differences on a whole lot of stuff, we're able to share a view, and it's just about making sure that we're consistent for industry here, so that they know that this is something that we're doing into the long term, so it's worth their investing. It's not going to change depending on the government, and also with partnerships internationally as well. It's so important that we present that single point of view. The other day I was off to go to a graduation for some women who were doing courses in computing and high tech. The graduation was held at the Space Agency.
Yes.
And I had a text from Stephen Marshall, the former Premier. He'd spent the day there listening to their presentations leading up to the graduation, because he'd been involved in setting up the program. He said, look, I just want you to know I've been here all day. They're fabulous. They're looking forward to seeing you tonight. I'm like, thanks, Stephen. So, you know, yes, politics is necessarily about choices, but so often it's also about collaborating together, and something like space really does bring us together. I do have this sort of sentimental hope, which may or may not prove to be true in the longer term, as Susan, not as Deputy Premier, that you know, as humanity, we kind of draw together as we look at the planet from a distance, rather than wanting to take Mars and divide it into half. You know, and who gets what, and let's exploit it, and let's take all of our complexities and problems and take them there. I kind of hope that we're sort of sharing a view that we've got to fix climate change, we've got to have a prosperous future for all, we've got to set aside racism and divisions between nationalities, and that space might be a way to do that, but it's marginal, isn't it? We'll see.
Sensitive. We'll see what happens.
I guess that continuity is good, both from, as you say, furthering those visions for the future, the noble goals of space, which were so brilliantly set up, I guess, even as far back as the Apollo missions, the idea that it was something global and uniting. There's also the economic impact that continuity can have. You know, the industry can have expectations set in that way. What do you think it means to local industry that we have the Space Agency here, and that we have governments, successive governments from different parties, agreeing on ways to approach this space as a broader issue?
Well, you know, it'd be interesting to hear from Catherine, because I know that you deal with industry, and it's obviously not a big part of our economy yet, but it's one of the faster growing technological areas. So how do you go when you're talking to industry in South Australia about whether they're going to be part of this?
Well, I'll start by just sort of outlining what the South Australian Space Industry Centre is. As the Deputy Premier mentioned, we are public servants. So in a nutshell, we are a state economic development agency here to ensure an enduring and sustainable space industry. And those two words are not just plucked out of thin air. They have the weight and the meaning behind them. In order to have an industry that is enduring and sustainable, we have been able to say that we've got support from the government as a whole, as Deputy Premier Close mentioned, and that's huge. What that means for industry is that they feel confident to establish in Adelaide, in South Australia, and they know they can grow. Despite COVID impacts, the numbers have grown phenomenally. We've got over 100 space startups in the state. For a population of, around 1 million, that's heavy hitting.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's
and we're not
huge.
talking about old space and telecommunications and banking. We're talking about the actual growth and development. South Australia also boasts amazing programs which are supported by state government, such as the Venture Catalyst Space Program, where we get international organizations, startups, competing to be here, because this quite literally is the center of gravity for space. And we've proved that by having things like the Australian Space Agency, like the Space Forum that happens, like the Andy Thomas Space Centre, Mission Control, Discovery Centre, and let's be honest, homegrown talent like yourselves.
Oh, stop it.
Thank you. Yes, I like to think that we are the highlight of the space industry in South Australia. Would you say roughly the same, Joe?
I would say it is us, and then there's a few below us on the rungs, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's a close race, I think.
Yeah.
I
We're
can-
competing with each other as well.
The tension here is quite visible. No, I think going actually back a point, I think there will be a lot of getting along in space with people, especially between us and Canadians,
Thank you.
if this interview is anything to go by.
Absolutely. It's a great...
This is magic. There is magic in the air, I think.
You spoke a little bit about the exploitation of resources, and that is something that we've kind of talked about on our podcast previously. Our very first episode spoke about the Artemis Accords and the potential implications for mining on the moon and mining asteroids and that sort of thing. Are you of the belief that outer space belongs to everyone?
I don't have a settled view, because I can argue myself in either direction.
Go around in a circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's inanimate resources. Why on earth wouldn't you? Particularly as we struggle on Earth to have all the resources we need. There's a lot of rare earths and so on that are necessary to help us make the shift to renewable energy, for example. So that makes perfect sense. Maybe I'm overly influenced by my reading, but I don't know if you guys have read the Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars.
I haven't, sorry.
So you should, although they're each about this thick, but it is the whole thought about taking over another planet and then just tearing it apart, as opposed to the group who were like, well, this is actually should be just Mars for Mars. And so it's an echo of the debates that we have here over looking after planet Earth. And of course here there's life, which is the big distinction as far as we know. But I guess what I mean is that although I can see the logic of the exploitation or of utilisation of resources, and I can actually see that it could be of a very great advantage, and I'm pleased that we're investigating it, I do think that there are lots of profound philosophical questions that are worth at least ventilating, allowing people to have a debate about. As our power grows, the question becomes, how do we exercise it?
Yeah, and some of those questions are very interesting. I know that along with the using the regolith to build cement and bricks, there's also the idea of utilising the silicon that's available there to develop solar cells and that sort of thing. So there's a very real, even in the information we already have to hand, there's a very real question of things that on Earth we normally think of as mutually incompatible. The idea that we might mine so that we can end up with solar energy on the moon is a very strange contradiction, I guess, compared to what we would see here. Did you have anything more to say on that one?
No.
Did I take it way too heavy?
I was like, that's so real. That's like deep. Yeah. Oh, no wonder I'm not the minister for all those things. So many things. How do you find time to read so many books? That's the question. I have.
That's
So
excellent.
I have just always had the habit of reading before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
And so it's just part of my sleep routine. And sometimes it will be for 5 minutes and I'm gone. But quite often the next night I'll go to read and then I have to work out how many pages back I have to go because I was actually asleep but turning over pages. So
That was my follow-up question. How do you have time to sleep as well?
Yeah.
Because, geez, busy.
No, it's all good. Look, there are people who work a lot harder and more difficult jobs than I have. I love my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
I think podcasting's pretty demanding.
Oh, well, it is. I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm glad you've
it
reached
is,
that point.
Yeah,
Really,
you guys do it tough, I know.
Oh, it's a struggle, but
long suffering. I'm working about an hour today, and I'm exhausted.
I can't tell you how much sleep I'm getting.
Yeah.
If you want some of the sleep, I'm happy to share.
If you want a reading list at all of space
Yeah.
novels, I am your person.
I'll squeeze it in. Find some time
Fantastic.
for it.
I would genuinely love that.
We'll do a separate podcast on books I've read.
Yeah.
Oh my God, can we? Let's lock it in.
This is great. We have so many spin-off podcasts from this episode. You guys are going to
The
chat
whole
about
Canadian
Angela
thing.
Lansbury.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many different things.
Oh, for anyone out there that is listening that doesn't know, I have had a full chat about Angela Lansbury, who I bring up on the podcast constantly.
All the time.
All the time.
You wouldn't think it would come up very often
Never
on
not
space
appropriate
podcasts.
to raise Angela
Right.
The
Lansbury. is what I'm
almost the
gathering.
first 3 words me and Catherine said to each other ended up being Angela Lansbury.
Yeah.
Which
Do
is
we do the
entirely
theme
what you were
song
here
now?
for.
Mhm.
Do, 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 do. Do, do,
Sorry.
do, do. Oh my God, sorry.
I'll see how
That's
much
Miss
of that we
Marple,
can
right?
license.
Teasing.
Interview is over. There's going to be headline in the
You guys are
advertiser
going to
tomorrow.
storm out.
Deputy Premier sings wrong murder TV show theme
Cannot
song.
believe it. Absolute abdication of values. No. So with the we spoke earlier about kind of the previous Labor government, and one of the questions I wanted to ask, it's a bit out of left field, but Elon Musk, a big player in the space industry.
He's a fun topic.
Yeah,
I'm glad we got
and
to him
people
eventually.
have very mixed opinions on him, obviously. But he was involved with the previous Labor government in
Big battery.
in the Big Battery, the
Battery.
Lonsdale
We
solar
love
battery.
the battery.
We love we're big battery fans over
Pro
here.
battery.
Yep.
Is this a relationship that you are fostering? Is it an asset for South Australia? What do you think about that?
Well, it certainly means that he's heard of South Australia, he's been to South Australia, and anyone who's been here loves it, right? So we've got an advantage there. But, he's an interesting character. And, I also listen to a lot of podcasts, and he showed up on an ancient history podcast I was listening to. He's completely obsessed with ancient military history.
Yes.
Like, completely. And did an entire hour or so podcast about it. He's a very, very interesting man. So I don't know. We have had a connection with him as a state. He knows who we are. He's done an incredible job. Everyone said we couldn't build the big battery that quickly. He said, I can do it and I'll give you the money back if I can't do it on time, and he did it. So that speaks well for the future. But you should never rely on a billionaire for your future. They're quixotic characters. So we should make sure that we have a really sound economic case to make, whoever's out there.
We should have a backup plan that's
Backup
not
plan B.
Backup
Elon
battery.
saves
That's right.
everything.
That's
and
right.
then we're golden.
A backup battery. Genius. Yeah, nice to meet you, Elon, but who else is out there as well, I think is...
Yeah.
And you haven't said anything that will get you angrily retweeted today, so you've done very well. I think
Fantastic. Yeah.
That's the
That's-
important part. Nailed it.
I've even complimented him on his
Exactly. You might
historical
have plenty of
knowledge.
retweets.
It's very impressive.
Yeah, well, I'll throw. I think Zuckerberg also has knowledge of ancient history, so please boost this when we share it to various platforms.
Any other billionaires you want to name drop while we're here? No?
I know of some, but I don't know.
Warren Buffett doing?
Yeah, what's Warren Buffett doing?
I
these
know
days?
3 billionaires. That probably says good things about me that I'm not keeping up with them, but yeah.
Given our immense knowledge of billionaires and all their work, do you think Jack and I are ever going to get to space?
If you want to, you will get there. And you have the wherewithal, right? Because
Oh, that's the difference.
it's
there.
expensive, right?
Yeah.
It's expensive.
You
But-
got me so
I know,
excited.
no.
I was like, Susan Close is guaranteed we're going to space.
No, I'm just saying this is the world we now live in.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
possible for people to go into space. When I was very small, it wasn't, and now it is. This is the new century, the new world that we're part of. How do we make it so that anybody could do it? Do we want it that anybody could do it? Do we want tourism? Do we want experts? They're all debates to be had. And are you tourists or experts is one of my questions for you. Like, what do you bring?
Well, I'm not sure what we're bringing.
If we send you
I
to
think
space,
we have to be tourists.
what do we get out of that?
Yeah.
Jack,
Jack?
can we insert about 40 minutes of thinking music here?
Yeah, just-
I presume you'd pod from space,
Oh,
right?
100%. I
Yeah.
mean,
You go.
It's a great season finale.
It is really good.
And
We're broadcasting.
is it
now.
a return trip you're interested in, or
If you
Like-
That is a
'cause-
public vote sort of
if you have Elon's ear and you can just get him to fling us into space in another car, maybe.
I think we're going to
Comfort.
run a mini referendum at the next state election. Does Jack come back from space?
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
see if he
Catherine?
returns.
Do you have the ambition? Would you go if you
I
had
was
the
gonna.
chance?
That was gonna be my next question.
It's a very good question, but I think what I'd like to propose is that there's different ways to be in space. You don't have to physically have your body in there, although what an experience, and how deep of a way to connect to humanity than to view our little blue dot. But there's different ways to be up in space and to contribute to space, whether that's your research getting up on the ISS, whether that's your podcast being part of space entertainment, a new developing industry, or whether it's just your ideals in agreements like the Artemis Accord or participating with the UN. So whether that's you in an international agreement being brought up to space, I think that's a way that we can all have a piece of us up there.
All right, now there is a
That's
question for you.
good.
Space entertainment. Does that mean we might have a space Eurovision song contest one day?
Only if I can compete with you.
Oh my god, I'm so sold on this.
Deal.
Oh, I don't know what you two are going to talk about.
Yeah,
for the rest of the hour.
I'm not sure. The definition of Europe seems to have stretched rather.
So yeah, okay. Euro. We might need to drop the Euro part.
Just vision.
Just vision.
Just a
Space
bold
vision?
vision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a bold vision.
Well, you know
I
what?
love it.
We'll be the judges. You
I
be
was
the
gonna say-
performers, and we're there.
Leave it with us two.
Yep.
Me and Catherine are going to get on this. It'll be sorted. Sorry,
Yeah.
did I distract from what we were really talking about?
I don't know what we were really talking about. I think we lost the plot maybe 5-10 minutes
Actually, to go back to space entertainment, what would space entertainment really be like? I know it's topics around space. I know it's topics like that. But can you get in space entertainment? Is that something we're working on, or is that literally just going to be me for the rest of the afternoon?
If you don't mind me jumping in here, Deputy Premier, the South Australian Space Industry Centre and myself have had the pleasure of working with our colleagues in Austrade with a Japanese organization called Space Entertainment. Quite literally,
Did you know
space
this?
entertainment.
Because that was
No.
a very good setup question.
That was very well done.
I'm just a very, very good podcaster.
Tell us more.
Thank you. Well, this organization, which is actually looking to partner with South Australia, of course, has a vision for what it could be to be entertained in space. So whether that's movement of satellites and whatnot within the sphere for tourists, or allowing us here on Earth to be entertained by space. So augmented reality, or really participating in that. So it's space entertainment is as wide as space itself and always expanding.
And I guess it's one of those things where we're still at the philosophical debate about what does it mean to be space entertained? What are we going to do? See, I've caught up. I've caught up with the whole industry. I came in going, which podcast is this today? And I've left going, space entertainment. I think that's my vibe.
And the Deputy Premier's sending me to space.
The Deputy Premier
Yeah.
has promised
If you
I will
want
be
to,
the
you're
first
going.
South Australian in space.
Yeah, I think that, I mean,
And I forgot the rest of it.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what she just said. Yeah. Ignoring
Sorry,
Andy Thomas.
Yeah.
That's right.
But although he, of course, had to become
An
an
American.
American while he was there.
Now that excites me because there could be a lot more. I mean, I know this industry is so much more than individual people going up to space, but I do think that this, even chatting just about this, is so important because it does make people look beyond that. I don't think I came in realizing how big this really is for South Australia and Australia as a whole, but mostly South Australia because
Centre of gravity.
centre of gravity.
Very good expression.
Who came up with that?
The brilliant team at the South Australian Space Industry
Don't
Centre.
pay them enough. Nowhere near
No,
enough. I
agreed,
think they're
agreed.
brilliant.
They're
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much for us to think about and expand on and grow. And as now the government's official podcast for space, that's
Yeah,
not true.
I'm so glad
I'm
we've
not
been
going to lock anyone
endorsed.
into that.
So glad to have this endorsement here today.
Jack's going to be banned from
It's
the
right.
building
I'm used to
shortly.
being verballed by my political opponents. This is relatively gentle.
And we're
and,
friends.
Yeah, it's
now.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry,
Justin.
You've probably got a much more interesting question.
Almost certainly not.
Oh.
I was going to ask if we could have Andy Thomas's phone number. So,
Hey, that's true.
I mean, you've interviewed him before.
Did you know that? I
Yes.
have interviewed him. That was one of the real highlights of I loved being Education Minister. I loved every moment of it, but that's one of the memories I hold very dear, being able to do that.
Without parallel, I think the greatest challenge that we all share collectively is one of climate change and concomitant challenges with ecosystems and biodiversity. How do you see space playing a role in managing and responding to climate change?
Actually, you're absolutely right. Space is an essential element to let us understand the consequences of climate change and our steps to mitigate it, because it is through satellite technology and Earth observation that we can understand the more dire consequences of climate change.
He's a tremendous human being, but I don't have his phone number.
Okay. I mean, that was all very nice to hear, but
Yeah,
really,
but
really
sorry
wanted
to
to
cut
know.
to the chase.
Yeah.
That's a shame, but I'm sure we'll get past that.
We'll figure it out.
We'll work on
We
it.
always do. There are so many questions that aren't so philosophical or aren't so deep in. I mean, the policy is really fascinating, but here at the fun, I think we're at the fun question part of the day. What would you leave behind if you went to space? Dr. Close.
So what would I not take?
What
with
would you
me?
just, if we were going to start again?
What would you
do a-
enjoy leaving behind?
Yes.
What's something that you would... You get to go to space, and I mean, this is very much the theme of our podcast.
Yes.
What nonsense? I won't curse
I'll
at this
say it.
point.
What bullshit will you leave behind?
Okay.
But there's so much, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much. How long have I got, and how long can the list be? And I guess I would like, we started to approach it earlier, to leave behind the idea that there are divisions between us and that we need to compete. That whole idea of I can only win if you lose, that my whether it's my gender or my race or my culture is better than yours. When there's that beautiful reaction from the first astronauts who looked down and felt that sense of unity of humanity. So I would hope that I would take that with me and leave behind the sense of negative competition and bigotry.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
That's
Oh.
the best answer.
No wonder you're the deputy premier.
Yeah.
Catherine, what would you leave behind?
I know I'd definitely take my Angela Lansbury
Oh.
collection.
Why are we plugging Angela Lansbury on the
Because
show?
she's 96 and she's doing fine.
Okay, fantastic.
How do you follow up with an answer like
I
that
know.
to
Yeah.
the deputy premier, right? For those of you who are familiar with Star Trek and the most recent movies and the First Contact, it takes the presence of another species to really bring humanity together as a whole. If I could leave anything behind, it would be our division. We are one humanity, and I'd like to take that notion with us and leave behind the rest.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
And here I was saying if I could take one thing, it'd be Murder, She Wrote DVD. They blow me out of the water.
Equally valid, equally important
You need both
answers,
to
I
unite
think.
humanity.
But what would you leave? What
Now
would you
that is
leave,
the
though?
question. Oh, I mean, I've said before in the podcast, I'm only taking one of my cats with me because the other one, he's better off in the mess of Earth, I think. I think he's more comfortable in the chaos. I don't know what I'd leave.
I guess that's the journey of this
I
podcast.
guess that's another philosophical
We will,
debate.
by the end of season...
You'll have a cracking answer by the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then there's the obvious follow-up of you can take one specific item that defines you, that defines your life and your journey. What would you take with you?
So that's the absurdity, because we're social beings and we're small group beings. So I
Yeah.
can't contemplate going anywhere that I would never see my children again.
Yeah.
Like, that's impossible for me to think.
Children count as
But
one
you
thing.
don't want that answer, probably. So if I had to take one physical
one
object that wasn't human, was-
memento,
yeah,
I
it was
guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
then I would take the biggest memory Kindle possible to take all the books that I've read and all the books I want to read.
That's sneaky, and I love it.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's politics. That's political
I
training.
take a
at its
library.
best. Take a library.
If that's the only evasive answer we're going to get today,
That's
I
it.
feel like
I'm
that's
happy with
okay.
it.
I
Catherine?
can go with that.
I wasn't expecting this one.
Come on, you knew it was coming.
I thought, handball. Am I coming back?
Yes.
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 We'd like to keep you.
Then I'd like to take something bigger than myself. And for those of you who aren't physically here with us, I have this little medallion here from me, which is an heirloom gift from my family. So my cultural heritage and background is my family's fought in World War II. They survived 5 concentration camps, survived Auschwitz, have moved to Canada. And now I've been able to work from medicine to being here in space to, having a conversation where I can have water as I want and talk about space. So I take that with me as a reminder that I'm bigger than myself, and that what I do for those have come behind me, but those who are going forward.
That is beautiful.
That is beautiful.
I don't think we're going to beat that.
No. Murder, She Wrote DVD's just pale in
Yeah,
comparison.
that's an embarrassing answer after that.
I used to watch Murder, She Wrote with my mom and sometimes Grandpa, so it counts.
There's a
It
connection there.
Fantastic.
She's saved you.
She has.
saved you. She's very good.
Thank you. Yes, you will be
Fantastic.
working for this podcast.
Learn
as
from
well.
the best, right? You gotta
This
have
is a
a role
formidable
model.
team. I'm really loving it.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
should do this. We
absolutely.
should go on the road for sure.
That new podcast idea,
Yep.
just the two of you on the road. I
We'll
love
interview you as our first
it.
guest.
Yes, you
though, right?
wouldn't mind.
Right?
I'm on board.
We could
I'm on
do
board.
with the.
I don't know how I'd go without cue cards. I mean, I'm liking being
I don't
the
know.
side of
I'm
the
doing
table
pretty
that
well
gets
without
cue
Q
cards.
But that takes me back again to what I've said, I think 3 or 4 times, is it is so much bigger
Yeah.
than just us.
Yeah.
Because even just thinking of one object that you want to take to space with you is so much about who you are and where you've come from and the people that come before, that you can't always boil it down so much to one, say, 80s through early 90s TV show where an old lady solves murders. I mean, I can. Other people probably can't as much. So back to you, Justin.
I like how you keep saying completely absurd things and then just passing it off.
Expecting you
Very
to just
nice.
naturally step into.
He thinks
the
this
role
is
of
our
host.
first week on the podcast.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
not used to it by now.
Wonderful. Well, you've stolen my last question, so I don't know how to wrap up the interview. What do I do?
I have a
You gotta come up
suggestion.
with one.
Deputy Premier,
Yes.
the Minister. You look a little bit terrified, but that's okay because.
I could just see a little mischief in your eyes just there.
Oh, you got me so right.
Go on.
I'm thinking of a new logo for the space agency. I don't know if you'll like it, but remember when Premier Pete got the kid out? If we just had a shirtless Pete Malinoskis, wouldn't that do wonders for investment?
Do you know how much he dislikes it when I tease him about that?
Oh, I love it.
And therefore, how often I like to do it. So I will be putting that on the cabinet agenda.
Yes, thank you.
That we need Big Rig Pete, as my daughter's friends refer to him. Apparently, that's a thing. That be our new space logo.
Yeah,
there.
and just tourism campaign, investment campaign. I'm happy to drive a truck around with just Big Rig Pete on the back. Space? Question mark. Big Rig Pete.
I don't think Peter listens to podcasts. I think I'm safe.
Oh, I think
She says with some.
I think we'll get it to him.
We are gonna
I
get this
think the
to-
teasing has just escalated a notch now. The
I mean-
punishment that I'm going to get back will be huge.
He'll be on this show next week.
Absolutely.
He's I'm going to say a great human being,
Yeah.
and he will think of suitable punishment for me for teasing him like this.
Absolutely. I think it's all going to come back in the end. And do you know what, though? You can tease Big Rig Pete for all of it, but it worked. You're back in government. Whether it was policy or Big Rig Pete, I'm not sure.
Magnificent combination.
Magnificent combination. But you guys are actually, regardless of Big Rig Pete, both doing phenomenal work. Like, this podcast would not have existed if there hadn't been so much investment in South Australia, and knowing that we lived in the home of space in Australia, in the Southern Hemisphere more or less, has driven us to be here today. And if that's just the first stepping stone on what happens with South Australia, we're thrilled to be part of it, and it's been awesome.
Bravo.
Thank you for creating a space industry so we have jobs.
Yeah.
We personally.
We
have
are the most important jobs to come out of this industry.
jobs.
And
I think so.
end interview there. No.
Genuinely, thank you so much for joining us. A real pleasure to speak to you both. And yeah, I'm so excited for what the future of the space industry is in South Australia, and space exploration and discussion and philosophy and all the rest of it.
And so are we.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Let's go watch the Murder, She Wrote.
Ample. Here.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, that's on. Don't touch that.